Good morning, everyone. I think we'll get started. It's 10:30 now, so anybody who's still coming in will catch up, I guess. It's nice to see so many people out this morning on this really nice sunny day. So I'd like to start off by thanking Marge Cleve and the Moose Jaw branch of SGS for sponsoring this presentation this morning. For those of you that don't already know me, I'm the executive director of the Saskatchewan Genealogical Society, or SGS as we call it. I'd like to start the session this morning by acknowledging that here in Saskatchewan, we are on treaty land. SGS and its branches are located throughout Treaties 2, 4, 5, and 6 territory, the original lands of the Ojibwe, Saulteaux, Dakota, Nakota, Lakota, Cree, and Stoney, as well as the homeland of the Métis. Couple of housekeeping things before we get started. Please be aware that the session this morning is being recorded and it will be available for viewing. Chris has graciously let us put it on our YouTube channel for the next week. So I will put the link in the chat for you for the YouTube channel. Please keep your microphone on mute throughout the presentation, just to limit the background noise and not to interfere with the presentation. The handout for the session was distributed ahead of time to the email address that you used to register. So you should all have it by now. If not, it's also in the chat this morning. Our presenter this morning is Chris Bukowski. She is a recently retired federal employee, and she is from my hometown of Hudson Bay, Saskatchewan. So Chris's maiden name is Winowich. Her interest in genealogy began in the early 1990s, but it wasn't until the late 1990s when Family Tree Maker came co-packaged with tax software. Then the genealogy bug bit. Soon after, she joined the East European Genealogical Society, where she served on the council or the executive every year since, except for one. She is currently the program chair. Her most exciting genealogical experience to date was a trip to the Ukraine in 2011 to visit her paternal grandparents' ancestral village. She found family in both villages, including a second cousin. This morning, her presentation is an introduction to Eastern European genealogy. Her presentation will focus on the importance of correctly identifying your ancestral village as your foundation when doing Eastern European genealogical research. She'll touch on some genealogy basics, suggest some useful resources, demonstrate some sample records for you, and provide some tips for confirming your village name. Chris has agreed to take some questions after her presentation, so please hold your questions until then. And I think it'll be easiest if you can put them in the chat box, and we'll take them in order that they come in. So Chris, I'm going to turn the floor over to you. Welcome this morning.
Thank you. Okay, so let me, oops, where share my screen. What is going on? There is the shared screen button. All right, can everyone see my slide deck?
Yes.
Okay. And I will minimize you guys. And we shall get started here. Oh, you know what? I want to also turn off my video. Find that gets a little distracting. Stop video. All right. Okay. So Deanne has already mentioned some of the things we're going to talk about today. We'll do some basics on genealogy, since some of you might just be new to genealogy, period. Talk a little bit about research tips. We'll look at some sample records in North America. These are important because our goal is going to be to determine what the ancestral village is. Once we know the ancestral village, I'll give you some tips on how you can confirm the village name. And from there, we'll move into some sample resources in Eastern Europe, just to whet your appetite. And we will also look at a few useful resources. There's a lot out there, so we're just going to really touch on that. It's really important to realize that there is absolutely no way you're going to do your genealogy in a weekend, a month, or even a year. At the best of times, genealogy takes quite some time, and that is particularly true for Eastern European research. And it's also equally important to recognize that not everything is online, particularly when we are dealing with Eastern European research. So let's talk big picture first before we get into anything. Oftentimes people will say, well, you know, I want to find Baba's family in the old country. Well, it's really important to understand that you can't just immediately jump the pond. I'll say, okay, well, do you know where Baba was from? Do you know her village? Do you know her parish? So oftentimes people will say no. So this is the first goal, is we need to determine the parish to which the village belonged. So how do we determine the parish? Well, you need to determine the ancestral village, and you'll often find that there are villages with the same name. So we need to be very careful with that. So our goal now is to identify the ancestral village. So how do you do that? Well, you collect records in North America. There are all sorts of records that you can find, and you want as many records as possible that might corroborate a village name. Just finding one name isn't necessarily going to get you anywhere. So you collect the records in North America. So how do you do that? Well, you start at the local level. Once you're done with the local level, you move out to the province or state. Then you move out to the national level. So really, when it comes to doing your Eastern European genealogy, you start locally, you move to North America, those records will find your ancestral village, then you can determine the parish, then you're ready to do your Eastern European research. So it's always a good idea with any type of research to have a plan. So if we look at it big picture, you want to establish an objective, and that could be something as simple as determining when your grandma was born. And that's really my challenge with my paternal grandmother right now, because pretty much every document that I've found in North America gives a different age or year. You're going to gather and organize your initial documents. And once you have determined what you already have, you need to consider what are some other possible sources of data that you can find. So you're going to collect this data. Like I said, you start with yourself and you work backwards in time. You work at the local level, you move out to the provincial level, the national level, and so on. And you want to document your information, including where you got it from and when. Because I absolutely guarantee once you start getting a lot of information, you're not going to remember where you got it from. So those sources are really important, and there's different kinds of sources, so you need to be careful with that. So, excuse me, you'll want to make sure that you're organized as you're doing this. If you're brand new, there's absolutely nothing wrong with starting with pen and paper. If you're a little more technical minded, maybe you want to start documenting in Word or Excel or anything like that. You want to have binders with dividers to hold pedigree charts, family group sheets, research logs, and I'll touch on those a little bit later. But you can also get electronic copies for those documents if you'd like. If you're a technophile, maybe you'll create folders on your computer to organize your records. But with paper, you can have file folders because you will accumulate records as you start doing this. If you've got original documents, like an original birth certificate or something like that, you'll want to have acid-free sheet protectors. You want to protect those documents because they are gold. And as you progress with your genealogy, you might want to move over to a computer or an online program to capture your information. Some of these are free, some are available for purchase. It's whatever you are most comfortable with. So let's talk about documenting your research. So there are different forms. I just briefly mentioned some. A family group sheet. I'll show a slide coming up. Pedigree charts as well as research logs. Now, when you create a research log, you want to make one for each person and make sure you document what record you researched, where it was researched, and on what date. And by doing that, you'll save yourself from repeating your work down the line. I've done that. I'm like, geez, this seems familiar. And yeah, sure enough, I looked at it a couple of years earlier. Names. You want to record names exactly as shown on the document. And with Eastern European research, you are going to find all sorts of variations of spelling of names. And there's no such thing as a right or a wrong, other than Eastern European names were absolutely butchered when people came to Canada. When it comes to recording dates, you want to record your dates consistently and without ambiguity. Personally, I don't like number formats for dates simply because with the month as a number, it's very easy to mix up months and days. So whatever method you choose for recording dates, be consistent. Use abbreviations. They're space saver. If like, this is more important, I guess, if you're writing things out on paper, but don't make up your own abbreviations. That will just confuse someone else if they look at your work, if you're going to share your work. So just use common ones. So on the screen, I've got some of the common ones. When it comes to locations, typically you want to record from the smallest locality up to the largest. So village, town, or city would be the smallest, and then maybe the parish, and then the rural municipality or county, depending if which country we're talking in, province, state, so on, right up to the country or empire level. Typically, you would record children in order of the birth. This is very useful because it helps you identify if there's gaps. When we start getting back into older records, you'll see that it's fairly common for children to be born every 18 to 24 months. So if you're seeing something more than that, there's probably a missing child in there. You want to record the gender of the child because certainly you're going to come across names where you don't recognize the name. So it would be helpful to record male or female. And you always want to cite your sources. Basically, who's the document about? What is it about? Where'd you get it? And when? I have an example for that. For my husband's family, his dad had passed away before I met him. And I had in the family tree that his middle name was Julian. And his mom said, well, where did you get that information? And I'm like, well, someone must have told me that because I don't know your family. And a couple of years later, I realized that I had a certificate from the funeral home, and that's where the middle name was. But I'd forgotten about it at the time. So as you're going along, make an effort. It doesn't have to be fancy. Just make sure, like, what's the document? What does it contain? Where'd you get it? And when did you get it? So I mentioned a sample family group sheet. So here's one that's filled out for my great grandparents. So as I mentioned before, you've got one form for each family. So you basically have the vital statistics for everyone that's in the family: birth, marriage, death, and burial. Now, typically only the children that's born to the husband and wife at the top of the page there should be on the specific sheet. So if in this example, if Theodorus married somebody else and had children, I would have a separate sheet for that family. And if someone marries, like if one of those children married more than once, typically it would normally be standard practice, I guess, to have just the first marriage mentioned on there. You'll notice at the bottom, I've got sources of information. So it's quite generic here, but at least for me, it's useful for me. So source of information number one. So I've got a Greek Catholic birth register for Trebokivsi for Anna Babi. She's my great grandmother. I got it at the State Archive in Ternopil, and I have an archival reference, so I know exactly where to go to get that document. So source number one gave me Anna's name. It gave me her birthplace and birth date. So she was born March 2nd, 1896 in house 32. It gave me her parents' name, Theodorus Babi and Katerina Dernowski. And it gave me her grandparents' names, Jacobus Babi and Eudoxia Bachevich, and Matthias Dernowski and Anastasia Kowalska. So there's lots of information on here. So let's move on to a sample pedigree chart. So I'm sure many people have seen these before. It's just a simple means of documenting information, and often you'll see it'll show 4 or 5 generations. So I've got my grandma. This is her pedigree chart. She's Serafina Protzak. So I was able to put in her birth, marriage, and death, as well as the name of my grandpa, Nick Winowich. So her father's family is above it, and her mother's family follows in below it. So this is a really quick visual for a family. All right, so where do you look for information? So you start locally, or even closer than that, you start with your family and their fan club. And you may have heard fan before. It's friends, acquaintances, and neighbors. So what can you find in the family? Well, you might find birth, marriage, and death certificates, which we'll talk a little bit more about that later. You could have obituaries, photographs, passports, all sorts of different things. Friends, acquaintances, and neighbors are also important because they might be able to tell you something about your family that you're not aware of. They might have photos of your family that you don't have. So once you've accumulated what you can from your family, then move out locally. You'll find information in churches, schools, newspapers, and so on and so on. When you're done with the local community, go out provincially. So vital statistics, you want the birth, marriage, and death registration forms. Registration forms are important because they contain so much more information than on that certificate. And you know, I knew this for years and years and years. I had my grandparents' marriage certificate. I never knew. Dad doesn't even know his grandparents' names. And I always knew I should order that registration form. It was probably a decade before I did. Bingo, I got my great-grandparents' names off of it. Your provincial archives, you can get the homestead records. Some have passenger manifests, probate records, and so on. Local history books can be a real gold mine. For my grandma's village, the local history books in Western Manitoba and in Saskatchewan, Wynyard and Wishart, gold mine for me. Then you move out nationally. So Library and Archives Canada, you've got census records there, immigration, military, homestead, naturalization. What a lot of people aren't aware of is the 1940 national registration records. They're held by Statistics Canada. Those are more expensive to acquire, but if you don't know your ancestral village, that's gold because people had to give a village name on there. So before you go and visit any institutions, you want to make sure you've got your ducks in a row. So you want to gather as much information as you can locally and what you can online, because if you're going to go somewhere, leave home and check things out, you want to be organized. You don't want to waste your time when you get there. So you'll want to contact the institution. So you might want to phone them, check their website or whatever. What resources do they have? You should know that before you even go. What's their policy on accessing their records? Their website might say that they have certain records, but you might not be able to access them when you get there. And when are they open? So basically get yourself organized so you can make the best use of your time when you are there. So some basic research tips and advice. Don't get hung up on spelling of names, particularly with Eastern European genealogy. Standardization of names is a relatively new thing. So, and as I mentioned earlier, that with Eastern European names being butchered, you cannot guarantee a spelling of a name. Keep in mind that not all sources are accurate. It depends who provided the information to be put in the record. So you want to make sure that you get multiple sources for the same piece of information. Take family lore with a grain of salt until you have proof. I remember my dad telling me that Grandpa came to Canada with his brother. They lived in Quebec for a while, and there was a fire and they had a big fight and they all went their separate ways. So I'm like, okay. We're not aware of any other Winowitches in Canada other than my grandpa and his descendants. So I've learned that yes, he did land at Quebec. I have both the arrival and the departure manifest. He came with people from his village. So is that the brother relationship? They did live in Quebec for 6 months before Grandpa moved west. So there's some truth there. I read newspapers right around that time, and there was a big fire in a portion of Quebec City where Eastern European immigrants lived. So maybe that's part of it. So there is some truth in there, but Grandpa did not come with brothers. We are definitely the only Winowitches in Canada that are related. So take your family lore with a grain of salt until you can prove it. You'll find online indexes all over the place, Ancestry, Family Search, so on. Use them as a guide. People make mistakes when they're transcribing records and making indexes. We're all human. So you want to make sure you get the original record. And the original record could also have more information than what's in the index. So very important. As I've already mentioned, you don't want to rely just on vital statistics certificates. You want the registration forms because they have a lot more information. Take advantage of free resources online first before you join a subscription website. Things like census records, immigration records. You can find some of that stuff on Library and Archives Canada, on Family Search, and it's free. So you don't necessarily need to register or get a subscription with MyHeritage or Ancestry. There could still be some benefits with that, but we don't want to spend a lot of money first. So do what you can with what's free, but recognize you might at some point have to pay. And network, super important. Join a genealogy society, and you guys you've already joined the SGS. Attend meetings and meet other genealogists. Once you start talking with people, it's amazing what you can find. All right, so let's look at some documents where you might find an ancestral village name, because that is our goal, is to find the ancestral village. So this is my grandpa's certificate of naturalization. So we have the original. So this is the front of it. On the back, it gives particulars. Kind of hard to see, so I'll zoom in. His place and date of birth, Podhajki, Galicia, February 12th, 1888. So my grandpa was a late bloomer. He did not marry, I think, until he was 50. He was 55, I think, when my dad was born. So this was wonderful, Podhajki. So this place, I'll talk about it a little bit later, created a problem for me. Some of you might have in your possession a baptismal certificate. So this one is for Katerina Sutilla, born Kulka. On the form, it says locus nativitas. In other words, where was she born? In Sutula, Parochia, so parish of Radava, in house number 106. So really lucky there. Now, if it had not said Parochia Radava, at the top of the form, it says Parochia. There's my parish right there. So I've got a village name, I've got a parish. So with something like this, you're ready to start go looking for records. But a lot of people don't have these. And it's important to recognize, it's kind of hard to see, but at the bottom of the form, this certificate is dated in 1947. It's important to realize that when you're dealing with Eastern European research, certificates are not the norm. People request certificates for a reason. Maybe they want to emigrate or something like that. The norm for Eastern European research is births, marriages, and deaths will be recorded in a church register book. So again, this is the exception. So even though we have this certificate here, it's still important to go back to the original church record because the priest transcribed this record from the original. He's human, he can make mistakes. So there could be an error on here or not, but you never know until you look at the original record. Passports. Some of you may be very fortunate to have this. This was my second cousin's grandmother. I believe it was her passport. We were super excited to see this because this says in the little orange box, and I didn't zoom in on this, she was a resident in Lichkovci in the district of Husiaten in the Crown Land of Galicia. So this is the passport for Clara Protzak. On the second page, what I'm highlighting there with an orange arrow is her birth date, the 15th of the 5th month of 1883. And with that date format, it's fairly typical. You'll see 15 in our normal numbering system is typically the date. Roman numerals is typically the month. And then the year, you might see 4 digits, you might see 3, you might just see 883. Below that, there's a description of her. So her stature is a medium build, form of face is oval, her hair is light brown, so that's the dunkel blonde. Eyes are gray, that's the grau. Mouth is moderate, that's the massig. Nose is a ditto. On the last page, there's gold here as well. We'll just turn that around sideways. It names the people coming with her. It names her children. Nicholas Protzak. It looks like John there, that is son. Next child below that is Joseph, son. Marie, daughter. Johann, son. All 4 children were born in Lichkovci, and it gives me their birth dates. I just about died when Wally sent me this. I'm like, oh, this is awesome. This is an official record, so it's probably reasonably close to being accurate. Okay, where else? Birth notice. So here's an example from Manitoba. So this is my husband's grandfather, I believe. So this is the registration form. So it says his father's full name was, so the baby is John or Jan. His father was Michael Bukowski. Racial origin was Polish. He was 46. His birthplace, Poland, in the village Narl. Now the family was already aware of this, but if they weren't, this would be awesome information. Further down the page is the mother, Maria Sierlitsky, spelled incorrectly, but that's one variation of the name that I would record. Her racial origin, Polish, age 39. She was born in Poland, also in the village of Narol. Another useful piece of information on this particular record, where were they married? The child's parents married in Poland, and when? October 15, 1881. This is wrong information. I know that. When it comes to the information on there, you need to consider who gave the information and where did they get it from. I've later found this couple's marriage, and that is not the marriage date. This is why you want multiple sources of information for the same multiple sources for one piece of information. Marriage registration. So this is the one that took me 10 years to order. So this is my grandpa's marriage registration. Place of birth, Austria. Well, rats. That wasn't very helpful. I already knew that. But I did not, and my dad did not know that his grandfather's name was Joseph, also born in Austria. My grandma, her place of birth, Austria. They crossed out Poland. Name of the father, John Protzak. Now, Dad would have known this because, well, actually, he never met them. These grandparents died before he was born, but they were in White Beach, Saskatchewan. They're buried there, so there is a headstone there. Maiden name, Annie Bobby. Well, it's Anna Bobby, but that's the way the name ended up being spelled here in Canada. Now, before I go on to another type of record, I really want to give, here's I think a really important hint. Saskatchewan Archives and Manitoba Archives have indexes online. They are not the easiest to use, but Ancestry has the Saskatchewan and Manitoba indexes available for free online. So rather than using the provincial website indexes, go to Ancestry. You have the ability to use wildcards, and related surnames are indexed. So in a birth index, the mother's maiden name is included. So this is, I use this one. I keep forgetting that they have Saskatchewan on there as well, but I use this for Manitoba all the time. Once I find something, then I go to Saskatchewan and get the registration number. All right, let's carry on. Here's a death registration form in BC. So this one, this is the only other Winowich that I found in Canada. And I don't think that we're related to him because this fellow, I ended up ordering his probate record, is from a place that's now in Western Poland. So it's much too far away to be a relative, but it's the only other Winowich that I could find in Canada. Birthplace, oh, just Poland. So that's not very helpful. And it's also important to realize what's the date on this form. This is in the 70s. So Poland in 1970 did exist as a country, but this fellow was born in 1904. Poland was not a country for 125 years. So if it's current Poland, this was probably, he was probably born in Galicia. Name of the father, Winowich, CZ, this is the original spelling of our name, but the given name, NK, not known. Doesn't know the name of the maiden name of the mother either. This fellow was a single man as far as I could determine. So the informant probably didn't know much about him. So probate records, you might be lucky to find an ancestral village in there, but you can also get glean lots of interesting information as well. So here's one example that the said John Latchko, deceased, came to Canada in 1888 and homesteaded what's now Esterhazy. And the same person that I followed my late husband to Canada, arriving here around Christmas time in 1886. So that's really kind of interesting information if this was your family. Within the same file, there was a certificate of naturalization. So whereas John Lachko, formerly of Hungary, oh, well, that's pretty broad. Now of Kaposvar. So this was in, well, it wasn't Saskatchewan at the time because this is 1904. Here's another one. The deceased came to his death on or about the 15th of February, 1920 by jumping off the coal dock at Watrous. Ooh, that's rather unfortunate. But down at the bottom, it says next of kin, stated to be a widow and 4 children in Galicia, whose address cannot be obtained. So that's kind of disappointing. So you get, you know, there's something out there, you know, there's 4 children, but we don't have enough information. Here's another one in the estate of Petro Sinovich, late of the town of Estevan. It's supposed that before the war, the deceased and his mother, 2 sisters, and a brother living in Mykolaiv, Galicia. Okay, great. I have a place name, not sure if it's spelled right. And but that part of the country has been devastated and the deceased has not been in communication. So we don't know if they're living or not. But I've got a cousin's name, Steve Latochky, Fort William, Ontario. So I've got another route to go examine as I do my research. Here's another one, John Majewski of Winnipeg in 1907. Surviving him, Mariana Majewski, Post Office Husiatan, Maui, that's not a T, Kutsubenki, Galicia, his wife. So I have a place name. Husiatan is spelled properly. The rest of it, I'm not certain. I would need to do more research. Now here in Manitoba, we are super lucky. We have access to pension records. I have tried so hard to find stuff for Saskatchewan, but I can't. So this is a pension application for Joseph Zluchowski. There's lots of information on here. I'm not going to highlight it all, but his date of birth is in November. Place of birth, Lanovici in the Powiat of Wurszów, Galicia, Austria. Just below that is his spouse's information. Place of birth, Szklana Huta in Brody in Galicia, Austria. So about these Manitoba pensions, we have an article in the East European Genealogist that written by Marnie Domilewski, our current president, that describes these records and how to access them. Unfortunately, I haven't had good luck with it. This example is from another friend of mine. It's her family. And if you can find something, they're gold. Naturalization records. The file can be thin or it can be fairly thick, but you can find some useful information in there as well. So we've got an application for a decision. So this is for Nick Protzak. So that's my great-grandpa's brother. Says he was born in the village of Lichkovci in the province of Husiatan. And it also gives his birth date below it. I don't have it in the zoomed in part. So if I didn't know the village before, I've got one now. Petition for naturalization also found in here. Here's his petition. Again, I was born on the 11th of December, 1901. Lichkovci is the village in the province or state of Husiatan. On page 2, his wife's name, Polly Protzak, was born in Gilbert Plains, which is Manitoba. Below that are his children. Ora, born 13 January 1928 at Sopov, and Elsie, born 29th of May 1930 at Sopov. RCMP reports. So correct name, Nikolai Protzak. Aliases. So now I've got Nick Protzak. The C there is a Polish C, which sounds like T, hence the name Protzak. also known as Nikolai. So I've got different spelling variations there. Place and date of birth, Lichkovsky. Husiatin is spelled incorrectly there. Date of birth. And this is the number format for dates that I said drives me crazy, because you're, depending on what the numbers are, you're not sure which is the year, which is the month, which is the day. But fortunately, within this document, I have other pieces of information that can tell me which is the day, which is the month, which is the year. Okay, in this particular naturalization record, I don't have the actual copy of the certificate of naturalization, but there's a transcript. Place and date of birth, Lichkovsky Husiatin, Austria, 11th of December, 1901. I mentioned earlier the 1940 National Registration File. In 1940, anyone over the age of 16, there were some exceptions, were required to register. It was part of the war effort. So the forms, the ones I've seen, are not clear like this, but there is a section here. Country of birth for yourself, your father, your mother, and their place of birth. So this was my grandpa. Both he and his parents, all three were born in Podhaichiki. My unfortunate thing is there were 4 villages in Podhaichiki, each in a different administrative district. So that was my challenge, is determining which one was his. Now, these forms, like I said, they must typically not be in good shape, because when you order one of these records, you also get a transcript. So which is good, because then you can actually read what the questions are. But keep in mind that because it's a transcript, there could be mistakes in it. Spelling mistakes, typos, or whatever. For example, and I just noticed, he registered in what place? Malfort. Well, no, it's Melfort, Saskatchewan. Passenger manifests. If you're lucky, there was a period of time up till about I think it was probably from about 1917 or 1919 up to the early 20s. Instead of a one sheet for all the with 50 passengers on it, each passenger got their own individual form. So there's a lot more information on here. So this is my grandma's Form 38 from 1923. Type doesn't actually line up, but her birthplace was Trebukivsi. Okay, excellent piece of information there. Further down, they say, what's the nearest relative in the country from which you came? So cousin Vasil Rydvinsky, Trebukivsi, Husiatin. So the person had to give the full address. So you should have a village and an administrative district here. Now, these are microfilmed on Ancestry. The form had a front and a back. So the screenshot shows the front and the back. On the right-hand side, I can see the passport was issued at Kopczynski, Poland. So if I didn't have an administrative district, this would be another clue for me, because if someone was from Trebukivsi, they must be relatively close to Kopczynski. A departure manifest. So I did find the arrival manifest for my grandpa arriving in Quebec. What people don't realize is there could also well be a departure manifest created at the port of departure. So this I got from an archive in Vienna. It was grandpa had sailed from Trieste, which is now in Italy. So the row with him is highlighted right now. He was traveling with a bunch of people whose last residence was Kolomaya. So that's a clue for me. I said Podhaichiki was in 4 different administrative districts. One of them was Kolomaya. So this was a really good clue for me as to which village was his. Further down, I see 2 other people coming from, it's not spelt properly, they've got Podhaichki. And further down, there is a Kolomaya. So I do recognize, so those 2 from Podhaichki, there was an Erdachuk and Hansharak. I do recognize those names from the villages, so I'm pretty sure that that village name is spelled incorrectly on here. So more clues to work with. So that was just a really quick overview of different types of documents that you might find in North America to get an ancestral village name. So you've got a name somewhere. So now what do we do? Because that name, in all likelihood, unless it was very common or a very short name, is likely to be butchered. So how do I know I have the proper name? So you're going to find this is going to be iterative. You're going to pull out a gazetteer or a map and check and see, can I even find that place name on a gazetteer or map? If you can look up the parish, done, bingo, you're ready to go. If not, we're going to have to try some alternatives. So how do we do that? So the gazetteers. So if your ancestor came from Galicia, you really need to get a copy of the Genealogical Gazetteer of Galicia. Brian Lenius is the author of it. He's done a lot of work looking at a lot of different resources. There are 6,300 place names, I believe. There's a wealth of information in there. It gives you the village name, the administrative district to which it belonged, the cadastral district to which it belonged, that's even more advanced, the Roman Catholic parish, the Greek Catholic parish it belonged to, if it was a Jewish community, all of that information is in there. So it's a really quick resource. You might find that in a local library, in a local family history center, or it's not available online, so you would have to purchase it directly from Brian. Another resource is Matthew Balava's website, halgal.com. He's got a ton of information on his site, but he has a section specifically on gazetteers for Galicia, Poland, and so on and so on. So those are different resources you can check for your spelling. Trying alternatives. So what do I mean by trying alternatives? You're doing Eastern European research, so it would behoove you to learn sounds of foreign alphabets. So it's not necessarily learning the language, but what do the alphabet sounds like? So the Polish CZ sounds like ch. So my maiden name was Winowich, ended in CZ. The English ear hears CH. Likewise with sh, the Polish SZ sounds like ch. So you want to learn what the letters sound like, because then maybe you can make extractions. So let's say I find a place and it's spelled Worstjiv like this. So sh. Sh sounds like the Polish SZ. Ch sounds like the Polish CZ. V sounds like the Polish W. So now I have an alternate spelling, so I'll go look that up in the gazetteer. I'll find this is very close. Worstjiv will have an O here, an accented O actually. And you can also try interchanging vowels, including a Y. So here's another spelling that I found in a document. Treba, so CK could be, that's a ch, Polish CH. I stuck in a vowel, W, W, C, C, E. So if you recognize sounds of foreign alphabets, then you can start thinking, okay, a sh. What's a sh in Ukrainian, or what's a sh in Polish, or what's a sh in German, is that type of thing. A tip when you're looking at handwritten entries, there will be times where it's hard to distinguish between a N and a U. All right. Another way of, another alternative is to use the Jewish Gen Gazetteer. And I just found out 2 days ago, this used to be a free resource. You now need an account at Jewish Gen to access this. But you put in the spelling of your village. I would suggest that you start broad, Eastern Europe, see how many hits you get. Because maybe I don't have no idea where in Eastern Europe Trebek Z is. When it comes to your search method at the bottom, use the Date-Schmolkatov Soundex first. You'll get the broadest results. And then when you hit enter, you'll get a list of results. There's a map link. So you can click on the map and go see where that particular place is. You zoom out, you can look at surrounding village names. You might recognize something. If you're lucky, when you see that this little icon over here, you click on it, you get more information. So here we get the Russian spelling of the name, the Polish spelling, Ukrainian spelling. They've got Cyrillic on there. There was a Jewish population there. At the very bottom of the more information, they give you the place name at different time periods. So 1900, it was Trebokiwsi, Husiatin in Galicia. In between the wars, it was now part of Poland. Trebokiwsi in Kopczynski Powiat and Tarnopol Voivodstvo. I think I said that properly. So smallest location up to the largest location. And it could be useful to click on see all places with a 10-kilometer radius, because the place name that you found on a document might be an administrative place as opposed to the village. For those of you that grew up in places like Hudson Bay, Saskatchewan, how many people know where Hudson Bay is? So you might give the name of the biggest center closest to you that somebody might recognize. Our ancestors would have done the very same. So now I want to just give you a little taste of what you can see, what you can find in records. So once you know the place name, once you know the Polish or the parish name, you can start finding records for your ancestral villages. So let's go and look and see what some of those might look like. I'm not going to get into these into a lot of depth because that's a whole other conversation, but let's just look and see what you might find. So you'll hear the term metrical records. That's what vital records are called. So here's a birth record for one of my ancestors from 1846. If you look at the columns across the top, Latin. Church, doesn't matter if it's Roman Catholic or Greek Catholic. In this particular time period in this area, you'll find the records were in Latin. There's lots of different guides online that can help you interpret these kinds of records. Halgal, the website that I mentioned for gazetteers, Matthew has a fantastic tutorial on how to read these. But if we just go quickly across the form, the child's name, Nomus Prolis, Michael, was born on the 29th of August in 1896 and baptized on the 29th of August. Family lived in house 47. He was Catholic. It was a male. It was a legitimate birth. His father was Simeon Winwich, Agricola, which is farmer. His mother was Maria, the daughter, illegitimate, Sophia Senyek. This is also questionable too. The godparents were Michael Piniowski and Anna Goch. Both of them Michael was a farmer from Pitaichiki. Anna was wife of a farmer from Pitaichiki. Here's a more modern birth in 1927. This is also another ancestor. The form is very similar. Instead of separate columns for the parents, all of them are listed in one column here. So Stephanus was born the 5th of July, 1927, baptized on the 6th. The family was house 315 in Pitaichiki. RC, he was Roman Catholic. He was a male, he was legitimate. His parents were Basilius Vinovich. In Ukrainian, that would be Vasil. You'll find that given names are given in Latin, surnames are given in Polish. Basilius's father was Nikolai, and Vasilina Sauchuk. Stephanus's mother was Katerina Vasilik, daughter of Basilius, and Maria Kacharak. His godparents were Johannes, Jan or Ivan or Ivan, Kacharak, who's a farmer, and godmother was Anna Kacharak, single woman. This priest, this is actually a bishop's copy of the record, annotated in the margin here. This couple married in 1917. Marriage bans. So in the Catholic Church, before a couple married, the wedding was announced 3 Sundays in a row before to give people an opportunity to object to the marriage. So you can find these for both Roman and Greek Catholic records. So this is one of my ancestors as well, in handwritten Cyrillic. Oy, oy, oy. I had to have someone translate this for me. But it's interesting because they tell you which days the banns are read on. And I just noticed as I was doing this presentation, I've got a conflict here. It says the last ban was read on the 8th of February, 1885. The marriage record says they were married on the 5th of February, 1885. So which one is right? Not sure. So just to go back to the bans for a second, just because you find an entry in a marriage ban, it doesn't mean the marriage actually happened. Something could have happened in between. I've been doing research on a DNA matches family. I found 2 sets of bans 3 years apart for the couple, or for a gentleman. The first one, the ban was only read once. There wasn't a second and third entry. I found the gentleman 3 years later with another woman. So something happened to that first one. So this is what a marriage register looks like. Again, across the top, you can see it's in Latin. So this couple was, it says, was married February 5th, 1885. House number was 155. Groom's information, followed by the bride's information. And over on the far right, we have the witnesses to the wedding. So here, again, they give, the groom is Johann, legitimate son of Simon or Simeon Winovich, and Maria born Senyuk, farmers from Pitaichiki. He's Catholic, he's 27, he is single. The bride was Katerina, the daughter of Gregorius Dawabozik, and Magdalena born Yakovic, farmers from Pitaichiki. Catholic, she was 24, she was single. Witnesses were Michael Vinovich and Johann Jastuk, both were local farmers. A thing to keep in mind with these records is witnesses were typically family members, so those could be additional clues as well. Here's a more recent marriage record, and we'll just zoom in a little bit on that one. What's really cool about this, well, we'll go through the record first and then I'll tell you the story behind it. So the couple was married on the 16th of November in 1937. There is no house number given or place name given. So the groom was Basilius Senyk or Vasil Senyk, a farmer, the legitimate son of Petrus and Vasilina Kushmarek. He was Greek Catholic. Instead of giving an age, the priest actually gives his birth date, the 22nd of the 8th month, 1912. Anna Ivanovich, the daughter of Vasil or Basilius, and Katerina Voslik. She was Roman Catholic, and this was not at all uncommon. Born the 25th of the 8th month of 1922, the witnesses were Stefanos Senyk and Franciscus Ivanovich. I found this record on microfilm at Family Search in about 2004. In 2005, I hired Brian Lenius to go to the village for me. And he met with people there. And this lady said, oh, well, her aunt moved to Canada, to Winnipeg. This was the aunt, Anna Ivanovich. I just about died when Brian told me that. I said, you're not going to believe what I have. And I already had a copy of this. And I phoned her, and she didn't believe me, didn't believe that we were related. So I never did get to meet her, but I did eventually get to meet her. One of her sons just lives out at the Paw. So that was really cool. Death record. This record that we're looking at here is a bishop's copy. Every year, the bishop was required to make a copy of the record, at least one copy of the records, and send them to the bishop. So oftentimes we'll say, oh, we'll hear people say, oh no, all the records are burned. Yeah, no, sure, there's a chance that one set of the records might be burned, but there might be at least one more. They made a copy for the bishop, but they also needed to, there was a point in time where they needed to make a copy for the local civil registry office. So if you can't find one set of records, go look for something else. And I can tell that this is probably a bishop's copy because it's kind of hard to see, but the bishop tells us which village: Pajas Philippi, Pajas Podhajiki. So here's the death for an Anna Warowich. She died in the 21st of January, 1865, buried on the 22nd, house number 182. She was the legitimate daughter of Simeonis, surname presumed or already mentioned, and Maria Wozni, local farmers. She was 28 years old. All right, so those are some of the types of records that you can come across. So let's talk about resources where you can find different pieces of information. There is lots of free information online that you want to start with first. Family Search is a gold mine for North American research and for Eastern European for that matter. Library and Archives Canada, like I already mentioned, there you can find census records, immigration records, homestead, all sorts of stuff. Local history books. Our Roots is, it used to be its own website. It's now a digital collection at the U of Calgary. You can find a lot of local histories on there. If for Manitoba, the U of M has a digital collection. Geez, there's over 200 different histories on there, I believe. Automated genealogy is indexing Canadian censuses, 1906, 1911, I think 1916, I think as well. So provincial vital statistics, online indexes. So I've got the links there for Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and British Columbia. I love when I find that somebody said they died in BC, because BC actually digitizes the record registration forms and puts them online. So it's fantastic. And there are a lot of people that I'm finding from Saskatchewan have retired out to BC. So that is wonderful. Probate records, Manitoba has indexes available online. Ellis Island for passenger manifests. So that is just records for Ellis Island. The Stephen Morse one-step pages, lots of resources on there, but they have a gold form for searching the Ellis Island records. Internet Archives, you can find lots of information on there. I believe there's Alberta homestead records are on there. AGAD is the Archive of Old Documents in Warsaw, Poland. Has digitized vital records, of course, for Poland, but also for surrounding areas. So there are portions of Western Ukraine that were Poland in between the wars. So Warsaw will have those archives. It's free. You just need to know how to search the website. The Poznan Project, so that's a more Western, currently Western Poland, they're indexing mirrored records, I believe. The next one is the Polish Genealogical Society. And people will often refer to it as Genetica or Geneteka. They are also indexing records and making them available online. Geneteka is specifically vital records, but their generic website has lots of other information as well. Jewish Gen Gazetteer, that's the one that I just said, I just changed a couple days ago that you need a subscription. But if you've got a badly butchered place name, that's a great place to start to at least give you some ideas. Maps, so these are the third military mapping survey of Austria-Hungary. These are often referred to as the Lazarus maps because like the URL has Lazarus in it, but they're they're topo maps of Austria-Hungary, very detailed. They're fantastic. Then of course you've got your usual subscription websites, Ancestry for if you're just starting Eastern European research, it'll be fantastic for North American research. But once you know your ancestral village name, you're not getting anything, or you're not getting very much at all from Ancestry for your Eastern European research. But I do find it invaluable for North American, for building out my DNA match tree. Genealogy Bank, haven't used it much, but I believe they've got newspapers on there. My Heritage, different set of collection. I haven't had a subscription there. Newspaper Archive and newspaperarchive.com I found have been invaluable for newspaper research. All right. What else do we have here? All right. So to wrap this up, I just want to talk a little bit about the East European Genealogical Society. Benefits for our members, we do publish a quarterly periodical called the East European Genealogist. It's I think a fairly well-respected journal. We try to include teaching type articles as an umbrella organization for multiple ethnic backgrounds, multiple religions. We try to pick articles that can, even though it doesn't specifically apply to you might be German and the article could be related to Poland. We try and pick articles where you can still learn something from it, even though it's not your specific background. So we might have articles on record sources, historical background, and so on. We've got a new members package that has a ton of information in it. If you're just getting started, we've got an article on how to begin your research. We've got a 4-page article, sources to determine the ancestral village name, and it's just a list of sources. So there's all sorts of different places that we suggest where you can look for information, information on maps and so on. We provide research assistance. We don't do your research like any other organization. We don't do the research for you. We're here to guide you and provide assistance. We've got a surname village database that members can submit their surnames and villages to. The entire point is this is cousin bait. Our database is online. People can search villages or names. They don't get your contact information until they actually contact us and give us their contact information, and then we put the two people together. We've got a library collection. It's at the U of W. It's free. Anyone can use it, not just our members. And it's specifically a non-circulating collection so that anybody can go at any time and be sure the materials are there, as long as the professors haven't removed something because the profs there really love our collection as well. And we also have monthly meetings from September till May. So you can contact us at our website, email. We only have voicemail. We are not a bricks and mortar organization. Everything is done remotely. The only thing we have that's bricks and mortar is our library collection at the university. And we've got a Facebook page. And with that, I am ready to take questions.
Thank you, Chris. That was great. Lots of valuable information there.
The big topic.
Shelley, do you want to manage the chat there?
Sure. We have one question. The question is, did you say the article about Manitoba pension records was on EEG or the Eastern European Genealogical website?
It's not on the website. It's published in our journal. And our sales of our journals are limited to members of the East European Genealogical Society. If you want the article, you got to become a member and then buy the back.
Okay, anybody else have questions? Please enter them into our chat so we can have Chris answer them. I have a question. You were on the Jewish Gen website. And when you clicked on that more information, you said that there was somewhere where you could get help on spelling the village names, and I missed the email or the web address that was there.
Yeah, the web address will be in the handout. But when you run a search, if there's that little icon there, if you click on it, you'll get a pop-up that will give you the additional spelling, but not all search results have the pop-up. I think they've got the pop-up when they've got a particular shtetl project for it. So they've got more information on the particular village.
Okay, so that wasn't your addition to your slide, that was actually pops up on that website. Okay, great, thank you.
You're welcome.
We've got another question here from Elaine. She says, you mentioned departure records. Can you explain what they are and where you get them?
Well, probably the more well-known departure records are Hamburg records, because a good deal of Eastern Europeans sailed primarily from Hamburg and Bremen. Hamburg records are available on Ancestry, so you need a subscription. You need a World Deluxe subscription to access that. Other places, it's hit or miss. There was a small window where many Eastern Europeans were sailing from Trieste, which is now Italy, and we're thinking that might be a way because our ancestors that were part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire had a military requirement to serve, and if they were traveling through a German port, they would have to provide proof that they served their time. But by skirting around and going down through Italy, that port doesn't appear to have been checked as often. So there is a window there where you can find some people sailing from Trieste. That's another article that we had published in the East European Genealogist as well. The list of ships that sailed and the dates that they sailed. And those departure records are available at the archive in Vienna. You actually have to write to the archive. Some people did not sail directly from like Bremen or Hamburg directly to North America. Some people took a less expensive route and went through England, like through Southampton. So those, you can find departure records from the UK, I know, on Ancestry, maybe on MyHeritage. I haven't looked on MyHeritage much, but I find there's very little information on the UK departure records. Other places of depart, Bremen, there's very little. There is an online database, I think, for Bremen. That one might also be on Family Search. And those are the only ones I'm aware of right now. So it's hit or miss. If you go to our Facebook page and search on, I think, search on departure. I think I had a post, it was an article about departure manifests. Oh, thanks, Sylvia.
Okay.
Sylvia shared a link for Bremen.
So question about naturalization records. Candace is asking because she has found out that she had to fill out freedom of information request and then had to create an account and enter an ID number, and that's as far as she could get. So she was wondering about that, as well as how to get the 1940 naturalization registration.
Yeah, an ID number, okay, naturalization or 1940 registration, which?
She started out by saying the naturalization record.
Okay, because yeah, the naturalization records I got were probably 20 years ago, so everything was through the postal mail. The 1940 registration.
Yeah, that's what I meant. Yeah, 1940. Yeah.
See, I didn't get an ID number. Last February, I submitted a request. Took 9 months. I totally forgot about it when I got it, but yeah, I don't recall getting an ID number. I was wondering about payment. And when they contacted me 9 months later to say, oh, we found it, now give us $45, I'm like, sold. So
Yeah, no, so Chris, I think this is two different questions. So for the regular naturalization records, there's an online account with like Immigration Canada. They want you to enter at some point you hit enter an ID number, which we don't know and we don't have, and they couldn't get past that. So I don't know if anybody's recently done any of these requests. And
so
they ended up just emailing some random something, and then they kind of did it manually. But they tried again. It's like this weird thing. I don't know what happened.
So what time period are you looking for the naturalization record for?
I think it was for someone in the 20s or 30s, 1920s, 1930s.
Oh, so you went through citizenship.
I had to, yeah. The library and archive says go through citizenship for this certain batch. And it turned into this whole like government website nightmare.
Okay, yeah, because I haven't had to get any through Citizenship Canada or whatever they're called now. Anything I've had was through the National Archive.
Well,
So
you guys were lucky.
More current.
Yeah, so sorry, for the 1940 national registration, sorry, where's that located?
It's just Statistics Canada website.
Okay.
Go to Library and Archives Canada. It's the Discover blog.
Mm-hmm.
And search on 1940. They've got a little write-up about the 1940 national registration. And within there, they've got a link to the Stats Can page.
Okay, yeah. No, I just wondered about if anybody else had tried to do any of these other naturalization requests lately and got nowhere. Or, yeah, not fun.
Oh, Sylvia shared the link for the Discover blog. Perfect, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. Oh, hi, by the way.
Hi, Candace. Nice to see you. We're a D name match. We found that out. We don't know how yet, but
Gerald, Brian is asking, the third military Austrian maps are great. I've heard that the maps were created of each village showing the house and house number. Is that correct?
not those Lazarus maps. What he's referring to are cadastral maps. And the cadastral maps are extremely detailed. They do go down to the house level. Well, house numbers, there's building numbers, there's parcel numbers, there's lots of different numbers on those maps. I haven't had luck locating any for my villages yet, but yeah, they're a really neat resource. And it's not enough just to have the map. You need to have the documents that go along with them to say who owns what. Because those maps, they've got black numbers and red numbers and they mean different things. And that's probably more advanced Eastern European genealogy if you're getting down to cadastral records. Good for you.
And now, did you see Elaine is asking where to get the cadastral maps?
Well, an archive. You have to get, and these things are literally huge. They're too big to photocopy, but there is the Gescher Galicia is, they do have a cadastral map collection. So they've been going to archives and making arrangements to digitize records and put them online. So you might find something on there. You'll find the map, but you won't find the records that go with them. I don't believe. Unless you do, unless as a member you do, I don't know. I've never become a member of Gescher Galicia, but you can check their website for the maps. Otherwise, no, you need to go to the Oblast archives and ask what they have. And some of the archives might have a map, but not the corresponding records. I found that in Ternopil for Grandma's village. We saw maps, but there were no documents. So it's like, because there's no names on the maps. Unless, well, there were, when they created the maps, there were actually different versions. Like there was the Fieldsketsen or Feldsketsen, which was their sketches, and there might be more documented on there, but the final version doesn't have a name on it. So those are much harder to get, hence the advanced parts of the genealogy.
Okay, any more questions?
I didn't see any more, Deanne.
Okay, good.
Actually, I have a question for Jerry Hukalak. May I ask where your ancestral family's from? Because I recognize that name from my grandma's village.
Jerry, did you hear that question?
You're muted, Jerry. Unmuted.
Jerry, did you hear that question from Chris?
Oh, can't hear Jerry.
I see in the chat that Jason has asked the question if they can contact you for help, Chris.
It depends what kind of help. I'll answer the odd question, but really I would encourage you to join our society. We've got a wealth of knowledge. The Brian Lenius, Genealogical Gazetteer of Galicia, is one of our founding members. Bends over backwards for our members. So, but yeah, I mean, you could shoot me the odd question, but yeah, I would really, I mean, our membership fee is $38 a year, and I think it's well worth it. So
Great. Well, thank you so much, Chris. There's lots of information there and lots of places for people to start looking, and lots of work ahead. So we really appreciate you doing that for us today and sharing your expertise. I'd also like to thank the Moose Jaw Branch again for sponsoring the presentation this morning, and maybe we'll have Chris back again for another session soon. Couple of housekeeping things before we go. The Regina branch is hosting a presentation on Tuesday evening as part of their regular branch meeting. Thomas McKenty is doing a session there, and it's for SGS members only. So if you're interested, there's information on our website or on the Regina branch Facebook page as well. Coming up on October 23rd, we're having an Ancestry Day with Leslie Anderson. There'll be 3 sessions that day on ancestry, so watch for more information coming out shortly on that. And one last plug for our 2nd annual online 50/50 is underway. The draw is coming up October 29th. Funds raised go to support our programs and services. And if you'd like to buy a ticket, the web address is www.sgs5050.ca. And last year, our lucky winner took home almost $6,000. So it's a nice little windfall just before Christmas. So just keep watching our events section on the homepage of our website, and we'll keep you updated on what's coming. We're also in the process of having a session on Scottish genealogy. We just haven't pinned down a date for that yet. So that's coming as well. So, and our next chat with the genealogist is coming up Saturday, October 16th. So there'll be more information on that very shortly as well. So thank you, everybody, for joining us this morning. And I'm sure you all enjoyed the presentation as much as I did. So enjoy the rest of your weekend. And thanks again, Chris.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Anytime.
Okay, bye-bye.